The first story is about Antonio Rosales, who was accused of dragging a 10-year-old girl into the woods, choking her, and then raping her in November 2003 in Sanford, Florida. 41-year-old Rosales was living in the woods homeless when he was found guilty of child rape, kidnapping, and attempted first-degree murder. The victim was going to the grocery store on her brother's push scooter when she was dragged by the attacker into the woods and choked until she lost consciousness. Antonio is described as a drifter with a violent past. He has been involved in multiple crimes, including killing an elderly woman in Arizona. He has also spent time in a Central American prison for another homicide. During his trial, he behaved aggressively in the courtroom. Seemingly insulted by being labeled a child molester, Rosales behaved in a very inappropriate way.
Know that I did that to that woman.
After hearing the final verdict, he threw a fit and grabbed a keyboard and smashed the computer monitor on the defense's table. He became really violent and toppled over the defense table. 2 officers tried to control him. Rosales still kept on fighting. He was on the floor with officers around him. Finally, with the help of those officers, they were able to carry him out of the courtroom. The judge asked everybody to calm down as the people inside were traumatized by Rosales' insane attitude. The Judge Nelson had to suspend the trial till the evening. The next day, the jury found Rosales guilty of kidnapping, attempted murder, and sexual battery. He was charged with 3 life sentences. David Mosses. David Mosses and 2 more teenagers were convicted for murdering an elderly 81-year-old woman named Dorthy Session.
David Moses, sentenced as a teenager to life in prison for killing an 81-year-old woman, has been resentenced to life without parole.
David, who was 17 years old at the time, entered the house of Dorthy Session in 2010 and hit her during a burglary. She was accosted in one room and then dragged to another where she was further beaten. She suffered a broken nose, missing teeth, black eyes, and cuts on her face. She was brutally killed by David Mosses. As per Terry Pelton of the District Attorney's Office, this was a senseless, violent attack on a frail woman. David Mosses was convicted for first-degree murder of Dorthy Sessions. He was on juvenile probation when he killed Session.
Mr. Moses received the punishment he deserved. Frankly put, he's just a dangerous individual, and there's only one place to put him, and that's in the penitentiary for the rest of his life.
During his resentencing, the judge Charles R. Bremer said that Mosses had done nothing since his conviction to rehabilitate himself, and he deserves to spend every moment of the rest of his life behind bars. So the judge sentenced him to lifetime imprisonment without any possibility of parole.
With a chuckle, a laugh, and yawn after yawn, David Moses acted strangely at his sentencing this morning.
After the final verdict was given, David Mosses' strange behavior could be seen in court during his trial. Many of us would be scared and nervous of facing life in prison. David Mosses, on the other hand, acted amused and bored when he was sentenced to lifetime imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He chuckled, laughed, and yawned. He seemed to be really sleepy. He acted very strangely, appearing to fall asleep in his chair almost twice.
It gave me the impression that he thought this was a game.
According to the prosecutor, David Wilson, he gave the impression that he thought it was some kind of a game. He did not seem the least bit interested. Instead, he was so bored that he fell asleep. There was no expression of remorse for his actions.
To give him that hope for the next 25 years, that he may have an opportunity to be returned to society.
His defendant, Terrell Wakeman, argued in court that his sentence should be reduced to 25 years in prison, as not he but his circumstances were to be blamed. According to the court, David had a lengthy criminal history, and he was also at a high risk for further violent behavior, so there was no potential for rehabilitation. The only punishment that he deserved in the true sense was to be locked behind the bars and spend every moment of the rest of his life there. T.J. Lane. This story is about a 17-year-old boy named T.J. Lane who was involved in the Chardon High School shooting in 2012.
In Ohio, a teenager convicted of a high school shooting that killed 3 students.
In February 2012, 6 students were shot at Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio, and the shooting resulted in the deaths of 3 of them. According to the witnesses, the shooter had a personal rivalry with one of the victims. 2 students that were wounded were hospitalized after they were shot. One of them sustained several severe injuries, and this resulted in permanent paralysis.
Which inmate? I believe it's the young one. TJ Lane. He's in custody.
By the evening of the same day, the authorities were able to confirm that the suspect was a 17-year-old male juvenile named Thomas M. TJ Lane. He was a former student of Chardon and currently was a sophomore at Lake Academy Alternative School. He used to ride on the same bus with several victims. During the shooting, he had used a .22 caliber handgun. He was arrested soon by the police. He was charged for 3 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated attempted murder, and 1 count of felonious assault. Because of his age, he was detained as a juvenile pending a decision by the courts about whether he would be tried as an adult. Later, a decision was made to charge Lane as an adult. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole in March 2013. At the time of his final hearing, when he came to the court, his reaction was quite a statement that he came in the courtroom wearing a t-shirt with "Killer" written on it. It was a very shocking morning for everyone present in the courtroom. He also made an obscene gesture in the court. A lot of people started gasping at his insane behavior. His court case drew a lot of national attention because of his strange attitude throughout his court trial. He smiled, smirked, and rolled his eyes the entire time that he was in the courtroom. The judge then addressed him and asked if he would like to make a statement.
Saying pull the trigger that killed your son, masturbates to memory.
TJ Lane looked at the victim's family. He gave them the middle finger and made a very vulgar statement. The victim's family called him an evil, disgusting monster who should never be let out on the streets again. The judge sentenced him to 3 life sentences without any possibility of parole. Diana Lovejoy. This is a story about an American woman, Diana Lovejoy, who was a software technical writer and was married to Greg Mulvihill and lived in Carlsbad, California.
Brian 1 as charged in count 1.
She was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder as well as attempted murder of her ex-husband Greg Mulvihill on 13th November 2017. She and her boyfriend, who was also her gun instructor, Weldon McDavid, were charged for carrying out a botched plot to shoot and kill her ex-husband, who survived the attack. According to the police, Greg and Diana were in the middle of a bitter divorce and custody battle over a 3-year-old son. After a messy divorce and lots of legal trouble, in 2016, Diana and Greg entered into a marital settlement agreement that allowed her to keep the family home, but in return the court ordered her to pay $120,000 to Greg for a stake in their family wealth. The court also ordered that she should share custody of their son. Diana became furious at the court orders, so then she planned to kill her ex-husband with the help of her boyfriend. She and her boyfriend, Weldon McDavis, came up with a plan. McDavis called Greg pretending to be a private investigator and said that he had some uncovered information that would be of assistance in the divorce proceedings and custody hearing. He told Greg that he would leave that evidence on a pole near Rancho Santa Fe. So Greg went there with a friend. They heard some rustling in the bushes. It was Weldon, who fired multiple times, and one of them hit Greg under his armpit, but he survived the shot. After a series of investigations and findings, the police were able to track down Weldon, who was involved in the shooting, and also Diana, who was behind the whole plan. Weldon and Diana had a joint trial. Both of them pleaded not guilty. They were both charged with conspiracy to commit murder and premeditated attempted murder. The judge sentenced Diana to 26 years to life in prison for conviction, and Weldon, on the other hand, was charged 50 years to life imprisonment because he was the one who pulled the trigger and shot Greg.
We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Weldon K. McDavid, guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
As soon as the verdict was read aloud in court, Diana fainted and collapsed. She was taken out of court on a stretcher and brought to the hospital. As we've seen, getting a life sentence can evoke a wide range of emotional responses from convicts. But regardless of how they react, one thing is clear. A life sentence is a life-changing event that has the power to upend a person's world. And as we've seen from these insane reactions, it can bring out the best and the worst in people. So, what can we learn from these reactions? Perhaps it's that life is precious and that our actions have consequences. Or maybe it's that we should always strive to be the best versions of ourselves and to make the most of the time we have on this earth.